A cold static hum pulsed through the dark void above Earth, almost imperceptible to human instruments. But someone was listening. Dr. Lara Miles didn't believe in omens. She was a woman of science, of logic, of peer-reviewed papers and mathematical precision. Yet that morning, as she stood inside the South African SK Observatory with trembling fingers clutching a mug of burnt coffee, she couldn't shake the feeling that something impossible had just reached out across the stars. The signal had arrived at 3:27 Universal Time Coordinated. 5 short pulses, 3 long ones, then silence. The pattern was unmistakable, though absurdly simplistic. Too deliberate to be natural, too restrained to be noise. A language, a warning? She listened to it 50 times, slowed it down, cleaned it, ran it through every analysis tool available. No metadata, no carrier wave anomalies. Just those pulses, carved into space like an interstellar whisper. Behind her, a young technician leaned forward from his desk. "You think it's real?" She didn't answer right away. Her mind was already elsewhere, on the year-long whispers in the scientific community, the increase in unexplained orbital anomalies, the hushed budget hikes in satellite defense programs. For months, something had felt off. And now this. "It's intentional," she said finally, "and that's enough." Within hours, the observatory's encrypted uplink was active, pushing the audio to a short list of trusted institutions. JPL, ESA, a few vetted university labs. By dawn, the Pentagon had already called. Then came NASA. Then the silence, the real silence. Not the kind that lives in the vacuum between stars, but the bureaucratic kind. The government's response was swift, polished, and utterly hollow, a statement about natural radio anomalies and routine space weather. Ilera had seen enough press kits to know the signs. The cover-up had already begun. 3,000 miles away, in a dim office beneath the Pentagon's earring, Major Grant Rourke read the transcript with a scowl carved deep into his face. He was a scientist, but 23 years in Black Ops aerospace taught him to read between the lies. The signal wasn't a fluke. It matched data from an earlier burst recorded at Area 52, Nevada's less famous, but far more dangerous cousin to the infamous Roswell base. More troubling still was a pattern. The same pulse intervals had been detected 5 decades ago. In the chaos of the Cold War, it had been dismissed, buried under layers of conspiracy and plausible deniability. Now it was back and louder. Rourke's office was lined with thick binders, most of them unmarked. He unlocked one near the bottom, flipped to a worn page, and tapped the scribbled note at the bottom. If it returns, it's not broadcasting. It's scanning. He tapped his pen against the note like a metronome, each beat matching the thud of his pulse. He'd tried retirement once. Now, he remembered why it didn't stick. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, in a crowded flat in Mumbai, crypto-linguist Vera Wusty stared at his laptop screen, rubbing his eyes raw. He hadn't slept in 2 days, not since a friend in Berlin forwarded him the signal. The sequence wasn't just deliberate, it was structured. The long and short bursts could be mapped to phonetic patterns. He ran a simulation on a hunch, aligning the gaps between pulses with no numerical intervals. The result chilled him. 2 coordinates, 1 temporal marker, 1 command. The temporal marker? June 17th, 17 days from now. The command? Observe. What the hell did that mean? Veer wasn't one for dramatics, but he recognized intent. This wasn't noise. It was the equivalent of someone tapping their finger on a window pane, not breaking in, not barging through, just letting you know they were watching. And Earth had nothing to tap back with. As the news of the anomaly leaked, despite government efforts to clamp it down, public forums and conspiracy networks lit up. Some called it a hoax. Others screamed Project Bluebeam, or ranted about the New World Order. But a smaller, quieter set of voices, former scientists, retired military, disillusioned engineers, were saying one thing consistently. It's not the first time. In a remote farmhouse in Wyoming, 86-year-old May Carter turned off her radio and stared out at the night sky. Her hands trembled as she touched the faded photograph of her husband, taken the night before his mysterious disappearance in 1974. They always come back, she whispered, to no one. The world spun on, but something fundamental had shifted. The chatter grew louder. Earth's low-orbit satellites began registering strange anomalies. Movement in deep space, faint but mathematically precise. A distant echo of the same signal returned, this time with slight modulation. Ilara wasn't sleeping. None of them were. Veer sent her the decoded segments late one night, and they compared notes. Something was triangulating Earth's position, using pulsar reflections. It was building a picture, or a map, and then came the last transmission. Shorter this time, but this one wasn't a pulse. It was a voice, for words, in pitch-perfect English. Prepare for first contact. That was when NORAD went dark. Air Force Command scrambled jets under the radar. Defense satellites were repositioned without public announcement. And within 24 hours, an emergency summit convened at a remote NATO facility in Norway. Ilara wasn't invited. Neither was Veer. But Major Rourke was already there. In that conference room buried under meters of reinforced steel, heads of state and black-level defense analysts argued in hushed tones. One question hung over them like a sword. Was it a threat or a test? No one had an answer. Back in her observatory, Ilara sat alone, her screen glowing with spectral graphs and waveform analyses. Her inbox was full of redacted messages and sudden job offers from obscure defense contractors. She ignored them all. Instead, she hit record on her private log. "If anyone finds this," she said softly, "know that the signal was real. That it wasn't a prank or a natural fluke or a rogue satellite. It came from somewhere deep. And whoever sent it knew we'd hear it, knew we'd understand just enough to be afraid." She paused, looking up at the stars. And they said it was only the beginning. Outside, the wind stirred the dust. A satellite blinked out of view. And somewhere far beyond the orbit of Pluto, something unseen and very much aware was already on the move. The room was cold, but not in a way he could fix. Major Grant Rourke stood beside a holographic display projected over the dark, polished table in the NATO command chamber. He hadn't spoken for several minutes. The others, generals, prime ministers, tech advisors, heads of space agencies, were still arguing in tight, urgent voices, but Rourke's eyes were fixed on the slow, steady sweep of an object moving across the display. It wasn't natural. The path curved too deliberately, adjusted its course too smoothly. It wasn't tumbling like a rock, wasn't blinking like a malfunctioning satellite. It was approaching. "It changed velocity again," said the French Space Agency director, adjusting her glasses with twitching fingers. "That's the third time in 48 hours. It's watching our satellites, predicting them, avoiding them. That is tactical behavior. Or simulated," offered a British intelligence rep. "AI from deep space? A probe, perhaps?" "Nothing manned." Rourke's voice cut through the din. "Probes don't send voice messages in English." The table fell into brief silence. In front of them, the object accelerated. Just slightly, just enough to be noticed. A correction, like a driver shifting lanes. Vera Wusty watched from a remote feed, seated in a dim conference room in Zurich, with NATO intermediary team. He wasn't supposed to be there, not officially, but someone had slipped him into the inner circle after reading his analysis. His algorithm had cracked something they hadn't expected. The voice that said, "Prepare for first contact," wasn't a warning. It wasn't a message directed to Earth broadly. It was targeted. It had embedded frequency signatures that mirrored Earth's military-grade satellite beacons. Someone or something out there had mapped the power grid and broadcast architecture of human civilization and spoken directly to its highest frequencies. The phrase hadn't been shouted into the void. It had been whispered to command. The implications were staggering. "It knows our structure," Veer murmured to himself, checking his notes. "It knows the difference between civilians and leadership." Elsewhere, Dr. Lara Miles was reviewing deep-skin imagery taken from the James Webb Relay Station, routed through a private backdoor she wasn't supposed to have access to. She didn't care. She'd seen what the official agencies wouldn't say out loud. The object, no, the craft, was massive, possibly kilometers long, though shielded in what could only be described as a distortion field. The stars behind it blurred slightly, like a heat shimmer. Its movement was too precise for any known propulsion model. But that wasn't what terrified her most. It wasn't coming straight at Earth. It was circling, waiting, not hunting, measuring. She turned her attention back to the signal. Veer had sent her another update, a longer string, reconstructed from microfrequencies within the second transmission. He was right. There was a pattern, but not linguistic. It was behavioral, a kind of ritual sequence, like a knock on a door followed by a pause, then another knock. They weren't speaking a language. They were following a protocol. And Earth had no idea what that protocol meant. On a dark ops base hidden beneath the Norwegian ice sheet, Rourke sat with the decrypted logs from 1974. The last time similar frequencies had been recorded, the U.S. had lost 2 satellites in low Earth orbit within minutes. There had been no official investigation, no public record. The files called it the scanning phase. It started with pulses, then observation, then movement. Now they were at the 3rd phase. He stared at a classified transmission timestamped just hours before the last signal. Thermal anomalies near Jupiter's moon Ganymede. Then another over Pacific. Not meteors. Not drones. Deployments? No, not yet. But soon. He stood and walked down the corridor to a smaller room, isolated and soundproof. On the table was a secure terminal with biometric locks. He sat down and typed a phrase he hadn't thought about in over a decade. Protocol Helios. The system required confirmation from at least 3 global entities. 1 American, 1 European, 1 non-aligned. Rourke hesitated. He could not activate it alone. Meanwhile, in Zurich, Veer sat across from a middle-aged woman, wearing a hijab and an expression of mild alarm. She was a director of a Middle Eastern AI research institute that had been running its own analysis on the alien signal. "What if," she said slowly, "we're not seeing a full message?" Veer raised an eyebrow. What if the phrase "prepare for first contact" isn't the main message at all? What if it's just the header? She tapped on her screen and showed him a complex wave map, a second, denser sequence hidden beneath the audible tone. Subharmonic compression, multi-layered data. It wasn't just sound. It was architecture, blueprints, possibly, a model, or worse, instructions. Veer stared at the map, understanding dawning slowly. "Not a warning," he whispered. "An upload." Dr. Miles confirmed it hours later. The signal had been modifying the firmware of unshielded satellites across low Earth orbit. Quietly, gradually, not enough to trip alerts, but enough to suggest one terrifying possibility. Someone was building an interface, not to speak with Earth, but to operate it. At 0400 hours GMT, 6 observation drones launched independently from undisclosed launch stations across the planet. None had been logged with international flight registries. They flew in perfect formation, triangular patterns, toward geostationary orbit. Someone, somewhere, had already begun responding. When Alara heard the news, she drove into the desert. She needed to be away from screens, away from signals. Just for an hour. She parked on a cliff edge and looked up. The stars looked the same. Cold, indifferent, but her mind reeled. What if the entire planet was a system waiting to be accessed? What if human infrastructure, power grids, defense networks, communication satellites, had already been mapped for compatibility? What if first contact didn't mean arrival? What if it meant activation? She looked down at her hands, palms trembling. Back in Norway, Rourke received a secure message from the Japanese defense liaison. They were in. The Helios protocol was one signature away from going live. If activated, it would trigger a multi-layer blackout, jam alien frequencies, and launch a first-strike algorithm designed to blind any incoming object within a 100,000-mile radius. It was a preemptive measure, a cosmic gun cocked and loaded. But Rourke hesitated, because if the message was peaceful, if it was truly an invitation, then pulling the trigger might be what ends a world, not saves it. At the last moment, the final signature request expired. He didn't renew it. Instead, he sent a message to Alara and Veer. It was brief, stripped of any classified language, but clear. They're not invading. They're integrating. Find out how fast. Veer's response came within minutes. We have less than 2 weeks. And someone on Earth is helping them. Alara didn't reply right away. She stood beneath the desert sky, eyes wide, because in the distance, just above the horizon, something shimmered. A ripple in the atmosphere, like a mirage. Then another, not meteors, landmarks, landing markers. And behind them, in low orbit, the craft waited, not approaching, not hiding, just watching. The countdown had already begun. The surface of the moon shimmered unnaturally under Earth's gaze, a thin, curved shadow dancing along its equator. Something new, something vast. The deep lunar observation array caught the anomaly first, relaying grainy thermal images that revealed an intricate ring structure assembling in orbit around the far side. It wasn't solid, not yet, but piece by piece, modules locked into place with mechanical precision, like ribs forming around a hidden core. Dr. Lara Miles stood motionless before the feed, the data cascading across her monitors in wave after wave of impossible figures. What haunted her wasn't the construction. It was a silence. No transmissions, no signals, no attempts to explain. The structure was being built with methodical grace, and whoever was building it didn't care whether humanity understood or not. She leaned in closer, tracing the faint energy surges that pulsed outward from the core of the object. Not radiation, not propulsion. Something far stranger. Subspace harmonics? Space-time distortions? They seemed to reach through physics itself, as though the ring were tuning reality like an instrument. Behind her, a door opened. Vera Wusty stepped into the lab, his skin sallow, his eyes ringed with sleepless hours. "It's a gate," he said, before she could ask. "That's what we're looking at." She turned, lips parting, but no words came. "I ran simulations," he continued, dropping into a chair. "The frequencies match theoretical models for stable Einstein-Rosen bridges, wormholes, Elara. That structure is creating the preconditions for a fixed spatial aperture." She shook her head. "But why there? Why not closer?" Veer frowned. "Because what's coming through might be too large, or too dangerous to open near a populated planet. Or," she whispered, "it's already opened before." They stared at each other in weighted silence. A shared understanding passed between them. This wasn't the beginning. It was a return. Meanwhile, in a fortified underground hub beneath Oslo, Major Rourke reviewed intercepted communications flagged by NATO cyber intelligence. Someone within the global satellite maintenance network had been rerouting command subroutines, adjusting positioning, modifying telemetry protocols, embedding tiny data packets that piggybacked on Earth orbital infrastructure. The name tied to the edit sent a chill through him. Dr. Lien Zhou, a name buried deep in the files from a 1974 incident. A Chinese physicist presumed dead in a lab accident. Except her death had never been officially confirmed. Now she was back, operating under a new identity. And she was working with the alien signal. Rourke opened the sealed Helios report once again, specifically the blacked-out section labeled Phase 4. He decrypted it using the key he swore never to use again. The page that emerged confirmed his worst suspicion. Phase 4. Initiation via human proxy. It had been theorized long ago. If an advanced species ever intended to prepare a world for integration, it would need cooperation from within, not by force, not through battle. Through willing participants, scientists, engineers, politicians, disillusioned or desperate enough to welcome the change. Traitors, some would call them. Others, visionaries. Rourke opened a private line to Veer and Alara. When they answered, their faces appeared side by side on a secure screen. "We found your ghost," he said. Veer's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Joe. She's the one modifying our systems, working under the radar, embedded in multiple national defense contracts. And she's not hiding anymore. She just launched something from a mobile pad in Kazakhstan." Veer began typing. "Give me the satellite ID. I'll track it." Ilara's voice was quieter. Why would she help them? Rourke didn't look away. Maybe she knows something we don't. Veer found the launch data within seconds. A high-velocity drone, low profile, heading toward lunar orbit, toward the gate. No markings. No beacon. "She's sending them something," he murmured. "Or someone," Rourke corrected. Elsewhere, Jo stood in the shadows of an Arctic research facility. Her face was calm as she monitored the drone's trajectory, her fingers tapping a rhythmic pattern into a black control panel. The interface responded in real time, no satellite delay. The system she'd built had long since bypassed Earth's networks. A soft tone chimed. "Phase complete," it read. She allowed herself a small smile. The rest of humanity still saw chaos, threat, the ghost of invasion. But to her, it was evolution. She had seen the first approach long ago, had read the silent transmission from the stars with eyes that burned for something greater. They hadn't come to conquer. They had come to select. Only those willing to shed fear would understand what lay beyond the ring. Back in Zurich, Veer watched the trajectory data in growing disbelief. The drone wasn't headed to the gate. It was aligning with it, syncing to its pulses like a heartbeat. "She's not sending them a message," he said. "She's syncing Earth systems with theirs." Ilara's fingers gripped the console edge. "A handshake protocol?" "No," Veer said, standing. "An unlock code." Suddenly, a new transmission hit every channel. It wasn't a signal from deep space. It came from the moon. A series of shapes, geometry, fractals, patterns nested within patterns, burst across radar and optical wavelengths alike. It was pure data, broadcast in a universal medium, mathematics. Rourke received the message on his end, too. The AI aboard his war room's mainframe began compiling it into visuals. A ship. No, not a ship. A hive. Dozens of organic mechanical constructs shaped like elongated spirals, orbiting a central core. They weren't just coming through the gate. They were being grown from it, formed molecule by molecule as if poured from light. And they were beautiful, terrifying, elegant. The data feed ended with a final pattern. A sphere enclosing a single planet, marked by 3 glyphs. Earth. Veer leaned closer. "They're preparing to encase us." Ilara whispered. "To isolate us? Or protect us?" Rourke said. "Or harvest us?" They didn't know. And that ignorance was the greatest threat of all. But the signal wasn't over. Another message arrived, smaller, encrypted in Earth's own quantum key signature. This one wasn't alien. It was human. A live feed opened. Dr. Lian Zhou appeared on screen, her face lit by the dim glow of lunar systems behind her. She stood aboard a platform inside the ring, already transported through, or perhaps reconstructed on the other side. "You see monsters," she said, her voice calm. "But these are caretakers. You see cages, but they are cocoons." Ilara stared at her. "You're aiding an invasion." Zhou tilted her head. "Only if you define integration as invasion. Our world is dying, poisoned by its own brilliance. They offer continuity, not as conquerors, as curators. By sealing us off?" Rourke growled. "By saving what's left." The transmission cut. Outside Earth's atmosphere, the ring flared. Not brightly. Quietly, like a candle igniting in the dark. One of the hive forms emerged fully, no longer simulation, no longer projection. It unfurled limbs like solar sails, began its descent toward Earth orbit. There were no weapons, no threats, only the slow, silent descent of something ancient and patient and utterly unknown. The countdown had reached its final stage. The sky over the North Atlantic shimmered with unfamiliar colors, violet halos, concentric ripples, and thin arcs of gold that pulsed like a heartbeat across the ionosphere. Civilian air traffic had been grounded for 3 days. Military vessels circled the projected impact zone, their radars blinded, communications lagged, instruments confused by something no one had a name for. In a temporary command center nestled inside Iceland's coastal cliffs, Major Grant Rourke stood in front of a transparent war table that projected 3-dimensional models of the alien hive construct in Earth's orbit. One by one, the entities were arranging themselves in a lattice, a delicate configuration hovering above the planet like a net. They weren't descending. They were synchronizing. Vera Wusty entered without knocking, shoulders hunched beneath his jacket, holding a tablet in one hand and a cold flask of coffee in the other. The outer shell just completed a low-frequency cycle. The whole structure is vibrating at 4.18 hertz. Rourke nodded grimly. Same as human neural resonance. Veer tossed the tablet onto the table. This isn't about planetary access. It's neurological alignment. They're preparing us, not physically, but cognitively. Rourke said nothing. Across the table, Illyra Miles adjusted a set of Radiohead loops around her ears, attempting to decipher a new, layered broadcast that had begun exactly 6 hours ago. It wasn't linguistic, not even musical. It was rhythmic, patterned like breath. She turned the dial slightly. They're sending sequences designed to entrain our brainwaves. Low gamma band, frontal cortex stimulation. Rourke narrowed his eyes. Mind control? Illyra hesitated. Not exactly. Think guided evolution. Influence. Preparing our minds for something beyond language. Veer looked down at his tablet again. This isn't invasion anymore. It's assimilation. The word hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Rourke exhaled through his nose. Staring up at the pulse of the orbiting structures now visible in the pre-dawn sky. To the untrained eye, they look like auroras or strange clouds. But anyone who'd watched the skies long enough knew they were ships. Sentient, ancient, and now irrevocably present. In a secured bunker beneath Beijing, Dr. Lien Zhou spoke with a voice modulated not by fear, but serenity. She sat before a panel of world leaders, some digital, some in-person, delivering what she called a choice. They will not force you, she said softly, folding her hands. They will offer, and if enough of you accept, the transition begins. If you resist, they wait. Another century. 1,000 years. They do not rush. A man from the Indian Space Research Organization leaned forward. What do they want from us? To preserve, Zhou replied, to carry you forward. But not all of you. Only those who can receive what they offer. And the rest? Asked the Nigerian defense minister. Zhou's eyes didn't flinch. Will remain unchanged, isolated, eventually obsolete. Meanwhile, in Zurich, Veer completed the final segment of a translation model that ran alien neural encoding through a modified quantum AI. The model spat out a singular phrase over and over in crude English approximation. Humanity has requested continuity. We respond in kind. Veer stared at the screen, heart pounding. Illyra, reading over his shoulder, whispered, continuity. They think we asked for this. Veer clicked open a data archive. Long buried transmissions from the Voyager missions, SETI anomalies, encoded responses sent to unexplained bursts in the 1980s. Thousands of tiny messages, drifting into space for decades. He felt sick. What if we did ask? Not in words. In desperation. Climate collapse. War. AI outpacing morality. Maybe they didn't hear what we said. Maybe they heard what we feared. Rourke stood alone on the Icelandic cliffside that night, watching the stars shift behind a massive arc of glowing steel. One of the constructs had lowered to stratospheric level, hovering silently above the Atlantic Trench. No emissions, no aggression, simply presence. The world had not descended into panic. Quite the opposite. Religions offered interpretations. Scientists chased every signal like a cipher. Millions simply watched the sky, silent, hopeful, as if they, too, knew something sacred was about to unfold. Illyra joined him, coat pulled tight, hair blown sideways by the salt wind. The rhythm changed. Rourke looked at her. They've stopped broadcasting to orbit. Now they're transmitting from below. Underground nodes. Deep crustal sensors. Something's waking up inside Earth itself. Left behind. Rourke asked, "We're already here?" She didn't answer. Across the planet, unexplainable phenomena unfolded. Deep-sea trenches emitted bursts of bioluminescent signatures. Caverns previously mapped now twisted into impossible geometries. Mountains rang like bells under seismic stress, their tones in perfect harmony with the alien frequencies. It was as if the Earth were responding, not with resistance, but with recognition. At 3:03 Universal Time Coordinated, the final stage began. A single hive construct descended, slow, graceful, until it hovered just above the Arctic ice. It extended a thin filament of light downward, not to the ground, but into the magnetic field itself. All over the world, compasses spun. Tides shifted half a second out of sync. Migratory birds turned mid-flight. And then the pulse came. It wasn't light. It wasn't sound. It was understanding. Every person connected to the transmission described it differently. Images, memories, emotions, but all reported the same sensation. A being of immense age and intelligence reaching into their minds, not to take, but to show. Lara collapsed to her knees. Veer began crying without knowing why. Rourke staggered back, fists clenched, his father's voice echoing in his mind of the man had died 15 years ago. And then, just as suddenly, the sensation stopped. The construct ascended, filament withdrawn, returning to the lattice above. Silence returned. But everything had changed. People no longer asked what the ships wanted. They asked what they themselves were becoming. Zhou appeared on every major network an hour later. No signal hack this time. No covert channel. She spoke openly, her face lit by the gentle glow of the ring above. You have touched the edge, she said. You have seen the shape of what waits. You now decide. Do you join them? Do you rise beyond your history? Or do you remain brave, beautiful, and alone? The choice was never forced, but it would never be offered again. In the Cliffside Command Center, Rourke watched Lara and Veer debate with scientists, philosophers, and heads of state. He didn't join them. His job had always been defense. But now, for the first time, he wondered what it might mean to defend humanity from itself. He walked outside alone. The sky was no longer dark, and above, the lattice shimmered with silent patience, waiting for her to answer.